thank Bill today for putting this session on. When we try and assist people with disabilities to build a life, sometimes there's all sorts of complexities that come into the question. And I was just sitting there listening to people thinking, my goodness, people know so much more than I do about some of the intricacies. So I think someone made the point that, you need to talk to people who know stuff about this, and that would be very helpful, rather than trying to make a whole set of assumptions. And sometimes for people with disabilities and families, it's hard to get around to that point because you're not quite sure where to start. But Field have brought together some people in this room today that could, I think, help you to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly about self-direction and about personalised lifestyle assistance. And sometimes I feel a little bit of an imposter up here talking, because personalised lifestyle assistance is really some people with disabilities and families that got together some time back to work through how to get a good life. That was the main question. And then when they, because when people were leaving special developmental school, there were very, very few options. And when you weren't happy, you didn't know where to go. So families sort of got together and said, could we build something that might be helpful for people to work through all of this? So really that's what we are. We're very, very small. We've up until last year, we received funding on an annual basis. We're never sure whether we'd survive another year, and we were awarded some recurrent funding last year, so that was great. But we have 3 part-time staff, so you can imagine that we're big wide, so we're really, really small. We're actually managed by a committee of management, which includes a person with disability and families. Personalised Lifestyle Assistance is a hosted project, and it's actually hosted by Melba Support Services, but we work in a very autonomous way, and in this sense Melba Support Services do our admin for us because we don't want to do it. So we're a little bit like some people that have a disability and families who don't want to do the admin, because that takes us away from our work. So what we've done is sat at the table with someone, a service, and negotiated what we wanted. We had a vision and we sat down and we negotiated what we wanted. Everybody in this room could actually do that. If you could find a service who would sit down with you and listen to what you wanted. You've got to be clear first, though, about what you want. And then you can start the negotiation. George's example is one of those where he sat down with someone that he thought was listening, and he negotiated an arrangement specifically around his needs. But I might talk a little bit more about that a bit later. So we're not here today to tell you what to do, that's for sure. We're just here like these kids, just trying to share some of our experiences that might be helpful. They may not. Take it, leave it, do whatever you want with it. But this is just what we've really found, over the past 7 years. Okay, so just basically, I don't want to talk too much about PLA, but what we've found over the years is that there's 2 pieces to our work. One is an inspiration, education and advisory piece. Some people just don't know what is possible. And so over the years, we present retreats, workshops. We've got a conference coming up. There's brochures here. If you actually registered tomorrow, you could still get in. People coming from all over the world talking about getting a good life in the community, directing their own supports, having say-so over their life. That's on the 9th and 10th of August. And other things we do is we put out a periodical that you can subscribe to. You can go to our website. This particular one's available for free download. That's called Thinking About Individualised Funding. It's not just about information, but getting helping people to think through the issues involved. It's a little bit deeper than just contact this person and that person. So we try and build up a whole lot of resources for people and families to use. The other thing is, you come to a session like this and you have your own questions, which will be different to somebody else's questions. And so the important thing is that people get the follow-up assistance that they need on an individual basis to work out their own life. So we provide some follow-up assistance for people to help them work through the questions that are important to them. So why has self-determination been important? And I think Michael Kendrick many years ago came up, if you go onto Michael Kendrick's website, you'll be able to download this, and he talked about levels of empowerment. And the first level is when the person does not make any substantive decisions about their life, and it goes up in levels. Now, I'm not going to go through these today, but if you were to have a look at this document, what you'd see is, at level 6 is when the person with a disability makes most of the decisions over their life, is that most of the people we were assisting, they were at level 1 or 2, so they weren't making many substantive decisions over their life. If you have a look, if you're a service provider, and you wanted to really look with some humility about what sort of decision making or where people sat, this is actually a good tool for trying to measure, where are people sitting in regards to their decision making. The other thing is that self-determination has been particularly important because typically the people we've assisted have had a range of negative assumptions and devaluing assumptions about their incompetence. So straight away people are thought of, just because they have a disability, that they're incompetent. That the services that are designed typically for people are designed before the person even arrives. Now, how can we do individual, get your own life, when the service is being designed before you even got there? And that's why George was, I think, having so much trouble, because the system in the first place was designed around something that suited the service. It wasn't designed around assisting George to get what he wanted. It's not like a menu. You can choose this, this and this, and if you don't fit, too bad. So when a service is designed before you arrive, it often means that all people get the same thing. And it's interesting, you may provide group homes. I'm not being overcritical, but often in group homes, people get the same thing. And interestingly, in this picture, nearly everyone's dressed the same as well. So it's really hard. I've worked in group homes. I know what it's like, and it's really, really hard to support people to get their own thing when you're part of a group. Individualisation does not work in group. It goes for programs, day services. You cannot provide individual supports in a group. It doesn't work. Two different things. So if you're aiming for individualisation, you need to do it one person at a time. I think we heard from Josie before about why self-determination is important. There's a whole host of reasons there that we realise. But most of all, what we've found is when people are in a position to make decisions about their own life, they get their needs met and their life becomes more personally fulfilling. People become more content. Doesn't mean that life is free from struggle, because life isn't like that for anybody. So if you're a family and you think that direct payments are going to end all of your problems, that is not going to happen. Because direct payments aren't a panacea to the struggle of life. It's something that could be helpful, but it's not the answer to a good life. And if we are thinking about individuals and self-determination, it's going to end in disaster, really. For people who do not have a say-so over their life, it's like the ship. If they're not steering the ship, it's going to crash, it's going to ground. At some point, it's not going to work. I just wanted to share a story of a young man, and I don't want to take any credit for this at all. Actually, it was his sister's doing. And we supported her a little bit to advocate, but her brother was locked in a room 24 hours, basically 24 hours, go to a day program, and he was locked in a room, 2 staff, the whole time. Now, this man is a very, very active man, and you can imagine being locked in a room if you're active, like you just crawl up the walls. And of course, his sister realised there was something more to life, and if he could have supports that were designed around his needs, and if she could have more say-so over his life, because she actually had some really great ideas. But the service said, well, no, he can't go outside the room. He had an individual package. I don't think that an individual package is going to bring a good life, because it doesn't. Don't think 2 staff are going to bring a good life, because it doesn't. What brings a good life is people who can think and are passionate, actually. I've seen people get a good life without funding, and I've seen people get a disastrous life, like this young man, with a big, big, big package. So anyhow, as the story goes, his sister was able to get a bit more footing and a bit more self-direction, and to help her brother move towards something that was more meaningful. This man now operates a dog walking service. He owns a business. 3 years ago, he was locked in a room. So for us, I mean, there's been a few definitions of self-determination over resources, but I think for us it's meant substantively transferring the decision-making power from professionals and governments and others to the person themselves and those who love and care about them. For us, that's really the decision, is pushing the decision-making power back to the people. And so that would mean control over all sorts of things, not just the money. And it would also mean control over when, who, with, how, all of those types of things. And we need to realise that, as I said before, that self-determination over resources is not a panacea, it's not an answer to everything, it's not a fantasy. Of course it's not. We've heard people that are doing this, it's real. It's not reliance on professional services or experts, and it's not choosing a program from a menu. So you might have your package and then just purchase segregated programs off a menu. This is actually getting, for us at PLA, this is about people getting a life. Not being entertained, not being minded by programs, it's about getting a life. So how have we done that? There's a whole range of ways we've done that. We support people one person at a time, never do group. If people want to do group, you might say to me, that's people being self-determined. They're having a choice. They'd like to all live in a group home. I've had people families come and say, we want a group home. Our sons and daughters all love group home and we'd like to have one. We're being self-determined, we're making a choice. Well, we wouldn't say that's a bad choice, but what we would say was we're actually not built to do that. We're actually built to help people get a life one person at a time. In that sense, what we try and do is when we work with people is to think about, well, what would be the culturally valued solution to this, whatever their need might be. We hold a really strong belief in self-determination, and in actual fact, we expect it. We don't expect people ever to be handing over decision-making authority to anybody else unless they actually chose to do so. And by having those strong foundational beliefs means that there's a good foundation for any of the other work that we do. If you don't have a good foundation for the work that you do, then you're going to end up building a house that's really, really wonky and that's going to collapse. The other thing, as I said before, is to uphold each person's unique personhood and assisting people to direct the resources in a way that makes sense to them. Now, here's only a selection of people, of pictures of people that we've assisted over the years. And they're all doing really completely different things in the community, not in disability programs, getting their own life. You know, like some people are interested in the fire brigade, some people are interested, Sarah's interested in quilting, Catherine's up there doing Tai Chi, Jackie's travelling the world, Dee's singing in a choir, Warren's like working at the police museum, Kim loves, you know, fringe festivals and those sorts of things. So, in a sense, what we've tried to do is work with each of those people to figure out how they're going to direct and get their own thing. The really important thing or piece with our work is to help people have good vision and to try and create their own vision for a good life. One of the things that we've found really important is that lots of people have trouble imagining something else, a version of life other than what they have now. And so we try and encourage people to dream a bit. And that means don't have a dream, you know, you've got 5 minutes, have a dream, I'll write it down, I'll put it in my filing cabinet. This means if we're asking you to create a vision and dream, we've made a commitment to you to help see it through. The other thing is we try and help people to think creatively and outside the square. So many people just keep thinking that they can only do what's available today. And what we've heard is people like George who pushed the boundary on this 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago before anybody thought it was possible. So there are people who are very creative. And so the important thing is to try and get people in touch with other people who are creative. All the work that we've done around self-determination is what we'd say would be rooted in community. It's not in service land. It's about getting people good life in the community. And that sometimes, so to achieve all of this, all of these different arrangements, at some point we've had to assist people to redesign certain structures and renegotiate certain structures. One of the arrangements that we have worked on with people, and this went back to some of our very early work when direct payments wasn't available, was to, as I said, negotiate with an agency to get your own thing by being very clear about what you wanted and to have an agreement with the agency. So we've worked with many people, with many different services to negotiate this arrangement. And so people then have a memorandum of understanding with an agency. They've come to some agreement. And the agency might hold their funding in their account. So if we were talking about, we'll talk about Lauren, because Lauren used to have an arrangement like this as well, is that they would keep the money in a Lauren account, it wouldn't go be shared anywhere else, and it would be kept in that account, and Lauren and her family would direct it. Okay, so and have say-so over what they did with it, who they employed, when, all of those sorts of things. Now, Melbourne Support Services has done this for many years, and it's charged a fee to do that. The fee has been about 10% of people's package, depending on what they wanted from that. So what I'm saying is you don't have to do this, but you could come up, if you were clear about what you wanted, an agreement with an agency that you trusted to do that. But you've got to be clear about it. You've got to be clear about who's doing what and the roles and responsibilities. Now, if you want someone to coordinate your supports, because you don't want to do that, then that could cost you more. These sorts of things. But you can come up with your own thing and propose it. Nothing wrong with that. You don't have to do what everybody else has done. Now, we did this, about 7 years ago, and we just sat down with bureaucrats and talked about it, a bit like George did, sat down with people and talked about it. We don't have to do statewide something. We could actually all get our own thing if there were people who would listen and do this. Okay, I just wanted to talk about, how are we going for some time?
You're doing Wi-Fi.
Okay. So that's sort of like self-determination on an individual level. And the other piece of work that we've done with people is really collective determination, collective self-determination, you might call it. And some years ago now, we worked with a small group of people with physical disabilities who were having trouble living in their own home, and what they found was did have some individualised funding, but they'd have to employ people for a minimum number of hours, and then even if they only wanted them for 5 minutes. They'd ring up certain agencies. The agencies would say, no, our staff don't work after 10. All these sort of restrictions that we're all familiar with. And Delia who's pictured in the picture there, had had some very bad experiences. I don't know if many of you heard Delia speak, but when her son got married, she rang up the agency that she was with and said, my son's getting married, I'd like a support worker, and I'm the mother of the bride, so I'd like to come home about 12:30. Would that be okay? What do you think the service provider said? No, our staff finish at 10. You should know this. Anyhow, she said, I'm the mother of the bride. I'd look like a child if I left at 10. Anyhow, the case manager, or whoever it was, said, well, no, it's just you just can't do this. So Delia, of course, this is her son, she was going to go further, so she went further, went up the tree, and eventually she negotiated this one night that a support worker or attendant carer would come at 12:30. Anyhow, she had a great night and really enjoyed her son's wedding. And then about 4 months later, her niece or nephew was getting married, and she wanted to do the same thing. So she thought she'd ring up the service and she said, my niece is getting married, I'd really like to go to the wedding and I'd like to come home at 12:30. And guess what the service said? You've had your turn. You have had your turn of being out of bed after 10 for the rest of your life. That's it, the job's off. Don't ask again. Here we are laughing at this, but this is actually real. And I'm sure it still goes on today. I'm sure. Yeah, right. So Delia, really, that was a bit of motivation for her, and we sort of got together and we talked about a small group of people. We created a little think tank about what people needed. There were more people with physical disabilities in this situation. And they ended up designing a small, flexible overnight support service called Nightlife, which is in the southern metro region of Melbourne. And so that at Nightlife, you can ring up any time of night, no job's too big or too small, and you can ask them for assistance. What's more, you can get it at a flexible time. If you're at the pub having a really good time, you can stay. And you can ring them up and say, going to be home in half an hour. If you're having a really bad time, you can leave early. Ever been like that? Been to the pub and thought, this is really lousy tonight, I'm going home. If you've got a physical disability, you cannot just pop yourself into bed at whatever time of night you want it. So nightlife really, it does have some limitations. People can't choose things. That's right. That's right. The other thing is, people have told me stories about, being in bed, watching television, and the remote control drops on the floor, and then you've got to listen to the television all night, So people can ring nightlife, and someone will pop over, pick up the remote control, and off you go again. Now, people with disabilities, this little service was really designed off a service in Queensland called Mobile Attendant Care, which was designed by people with disability. The interesting thing about nightlife and mobile attendant care is they're both what we call consumer governed services. Now, this is where people who are self-directing their support self-direct their service. They have a constitution, 75% of the people need to be people with disabilities who sit on their board, and so on and so on. And so it operates in a very small geographical location because the mobile workers have to get around to people and these sorts of things. Why I'm telling you this is that, it's just about stretching ourselves on the idea of self-determination. Actually, people with disabilities and families have some good ideas, and we can support them actually to create their own thing, no matter how small or how big. But we don't have to do it for people. We can do it with people. It doesn't mean you have to do everything that people have to have discussions and negotiate and all of those sorts of things. But, I just find this inspiring. I don't know about you. But this didn't happen overnight either. This took a lot of work, and a lot of work from some very dedicated people to come together time and time again. They put a proposal into DHS. It was funded. It's funded as a service. There's a whole lot of requests for it to be, I think it's already in a couple of other regions. Not quite the same thing though, because it's not consumer government. Okay, I just want to quickly tell some very quick stories. For us, self-determination is important, but what it leads to is even more important, that people get a good life. Here's Scott, who was at a day service, amazing artist, just amazing. He used to get scolded for buying fish and chips on a Friday at the day service. So his family really have harnessed his gift in art and see him now as an artist. So he holds solo exhibitions, he sells his work, the pieces are worth $700 a piece. Artists come and buy his work. So man in day service now, selling his extraordinary work. Now this gift was always there. He always drew, but nobody saw it. This is some more of his work. It's amazing, isn't it? He sells greeting cards. This is Kim. So some people might think, well, how is self-determination possible for people with really complex, moderate to profound intellectual disability? This is, Kim's actually self-determining her own life because people are listening to her. She doesn't have a clue about resources, but the people around her are directing the resources in the way, really, that she wants them directed. Kim's family had never had any respite because every time she went into respite, they'd get a call and the respite place would say, come get Kim. She can't stay the night. She's hard work. Take her home. So family had never had a break ever. Anyhow, they came to a conference that we had some years back, and Brenda and Bruce were inspired to think differently about Kim's life. So to cut a long story short, Kim now lives in her own place. She's lived in two places. The two-storey place down the bottom is now where she lives. She's got profound intellectual disability, lives in her own place. She lives with two housemates who are permaculturists, because Kim, at the heart of it, is a hippie. She loves hippies. And she's supported Brenda and Bruce through a package, employ workers. They, a bit like George, don't employ disability support workers, they sort of employ hippies, because Kim loves hippies. You know, she clicks with them. And so in this sense, from our perspective, self-determination is actually possible for even people with profound disabilities, intellectual disability, as long as there is people around them who can listen and push forward on their voice. Here's Kim out and about in the community, and there's also Cameron's story. Some of you may have heard that Cameron was living at home. He now lives in his own place as well with a housemate. Matt's story, Matt was living at home too, and he now lives in his own place, and Warren and so on. But I'm going to have to end there. So thank you all, and hopefully we can move even further forward, because I think this is really important for people with disabilities and families.